All right then. Well, Shannon, pleasure to be hanging out in Texas with you.
Oh, yeah.
Colorado, we met and hung out there. Newest Loki member.
First time back in Texas in over 30 years, too.
Okay. You picked some good weather for it, I think.
I did indeed.
It's been nice and sunny. Well, we're hanging out here at the Regen World 25 event. Week-long, regenerative, intentional, community building, figuring out how do we actually create these mechanisms and these places and these solutions to make people better, make places better, fix the world, save the world.
Yeah.
How's it been going for you so far? What do you think?
I've been loving it. The breakout rooms, the panel discussions, everything here is really hyper-focused on how do we make a better world? How do we solve these challenges? How do we create land development deals that are triple win or even quadruple win, where you got people, planet, and purpose aligned? I love it.
Yeah.
Loving every bit of it.
Purpose is key. We got the little ones jumping around. It's a very nice environment. Everybody's kind of feeling very productive, but also very communal. What are some interesting, tangible things you've been taking away so far that kind of line up with what you've been working on?
Some of the innovations in pitching have been amazing. I was in a breakout room with a fellow that's got an agentic AI process that you can put in just a general idea of this is what I'm looking to do with my business. And it goes through an iterative process. And at the end of it, you've got a complete pitch deck, including graphics all laid out. I mean, that was pretty incredible. I got that as a gift this week. You've got the council gatherings are really interesting. You've got a bunch of people in the room, and people are sharing wisdom, and then they're synthesizing it and collating it into collective solutions and visions. A lot of those types of things of just intentional purpose and kind of moving things forward, and how do we collaborate as a community.
Nice. Yeah, there are definitely a couple programs I was checking out that have a focus on how to get the business structures in place, right? There were some, like you said, pitching. How do you actually pitch a project? What are your priorities in finance? What are some things that you've been thinking about? And maybe you could talk about your approach with the community kitchens, food reclamation, upscaling, and these different systems. What kind of things have you been taking away as far as how you kind of think about the business model, or how you, some kind of model that actually makes it work and makes it attractive for social or, private investment?
Well, one of the biggest things that I'm noticing is that everybody needs a food component. And we've got this kind of hyper focus in the regenerative movement on land design and land development and let's go grow stuff. And we're starting to have more of a conversation about what do we do with the resources that we already have? And how can we create coordination mechanisms that'll allow us to be able to take some of the food that's ending up in landfills right now and get it back into communities, get it transitioned into compost so that we can get it back out to farmers? How can we support the regenerative farming community at a higher level? So I've been coming at this from a pick and shovel approach, looking at the regenerative movement and saying, okay, so we're all kind of in individual projects right now, but how do we start looking at the higher level of this, of like, what does everybody need? How do we create new markets for farmers in inner cities so that we can increase that transition of being able to negotiate for fair wages for harvest? How do we create opportunities for kids in inner cities to come out to the farms and really get a better understanding of where their food comes from? And so really, how do we start flowing these mechanisms and energies back and forth in a better way?
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different components, right? There's so many things that go into this.
Yeah.
And we've been talking quite a bit about community development and the elements that go into that.
Yeah.
You've got obviously the places where people need to stay. You've got these residential solutions. There's educational solutions people are talking about.
Sure.
Waste streams. So we have to think about our waste. And I think we've kind of landed in the place, like, how do you build a place without the right soil?
Right.
And soil just seems to be one of these critical elements that we have to focus on and really kind of get the dirt to this healthy place that we can build everything else on. Yeah?
Oh yeah, well, and that ties into a much bigger picture question. So if we're looking at the planetary kind of where we're going right now, there's a growing recognition that we need to start getting a handle on the elements that are going into climate change. And while historically we've been having this argument or this conversation about energy transition for a very, very long time, there's starting to be a growing recognition that 35% of our greenhouse gases are coming from the food system. So when we start talking about the soil production, when we start talking about growing regeneratively on land and sequestering carbon and using no-till farming practices to be able to move forward in a way where we're pushing back against these trends, like that's quite literally creating the mechanisms that are going to allow us to be able to claw ourselves back into regulation.
Yeah, decentralization is a big part of this, right?
Oh yeah.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the concept of how we can decentralize some of these systems into our backyards, into local community production, and then the space of the commons and how that ties together.
Yeah, well, and that ties into economies of scale too. So we talk about a lot about going bigger and creating these huge all-encompassing type of strategies, but at the end of the day, we also have to be really cognizant of the people that are in the cities and then that want to stay in the cities. And that's where 85-90% of us are at right now. So while we've got this great utopian vision of let's all move out to the country and be farmers, we also have to understand that there's real challenges that the farming community can actually support the urban community with. We can create some short supply chains that can get good, healthy food into inner city areas where supermarkets can't go, simply by creating farm stands, by creating these direct pipelines for the farming community to be able to get in. And what that does in turn is it supports regenerative agriculture by essentially making it more stable economically. Because if you can negotiate fair prices for your harvest, and if you can in many cases bypass local wholesalers and negotiate direct with farmers in inner cities, now you're creating an economic mechanism that is more robust and anti-fragile. And as we're starting to move into a new era where the global mechanisms are starting to get shaky, and people are starting to notice that. It started with COVID. We're starting to see situations where, you know, these things that we've assumed are going to kind of continue forever. Now we're starting to see situations where maybe that's not necessarily the case, and maybe we should start thinking about how do we develop some resiliency internally, and that applies across the rural and urban communities. It applies at the bioregional level and also at the individual community level. We talked about decentralization. We've got technologies right now that can allow us to communicate across backyards and across town and across cities and across different areas where you and I are keeping our autonomy. We're still keeping our personal sovereignty, but we're still able to exchange resources and information and data. And that means a lot of things to a lot of different people. You know, that from climate scientists looking for different ways to understand how water flows through communities, all the way down to just local growers trying to figure out how to get to market. This is all super important.
And potentially the community economics and ways for people to experience exchange on these private levels in communities and actually get something from their production, I guess, right?
Yeah.
When you're working in your own backyard.
Yeah, everybody wants credit. Everybody wants, I mean, I know an 83-year-old lady in my neighborhood that's got a 40-foot tall apple tree. And right now, everything that comes out of that apple tree is yard waste because she's not going to be able to climb that tree. Right. But if she can provide that as an input into a commons, into an opportunity where she can get it across town, maybe we can get it to a commercial kitchen and start turning it into something that's shelf stable that lasts through the winter. Now she can get that credit for it and maybe turn around and get some eggs for it. Maybe turn around and get some help with her car. Like, there's different opportunities where we can start using these technologies to be able to create almost a barter economy.
So I'm thinking that probably there are some particularly large chains that are not super thrilled for people to be circumventing their systems. What are ways to kind of promote this without stirring the pot too much? And
so I don't know that that's entirely true, because from my perspective, you know, and from a community justice perspective, if some place has been identified as a food desert, then by definition, that means the supermarkets have abandoned it. That means that area is basically a wide open blue ocean of opportunity.
Right.
And so if you can figure out a grocery store model like the one we developed to go into that area and be able to supply consistent fresh food, and to be able to create a community hub and even last mile food rescue opportunities where the community can gel together around food and each other, well, that's not competing with anything.
Right.
So what's a supermarket going to do? Say, no, you can't go into that area that we're not going to go into? It doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, so we're not even necessarily competing, kind of in the strain of the parallel societies approach that comes from the network state side.
Yeah.
It's not about taking on those establishments or challenging or competing with them. It's saying, look, there's a need here, so let's get in there and actually support this need and focus on that in that localized way.
Well, and it even goes beyond that to full collaboration with corporations, because like on the food rescue side, that's a perfect example. There's companies for all the way from your major hotels and convention centers all the way down to individual neighborhood restaurants that at the end of the shift, when they're closing down the kitchen and sending everybody home, they don't want to throw the food away.
Right.
The problem is they don't have a mechanism to get it across town, and the food bank system operates on bank hours. So there's a disconnect of coordination that it's an opportunity that can be filled very easily by the community coming together, incorporating blockchain technology, aligning with, you know, this Kiwanis club or this church down the street that's got an underutilized commercial kitchen. We've got tons of resources throughout the community. We have the will throughout the community. The only thing that we're lacking is coordination and capacity, like actual like mechanisms, the equipment, the location, the trucks. This is not a complicated process. The problem is that for very, very long, we've been relying on implementing organizations that we've been assuming are doing everything in their power to be able to start to solve these problems. And the reality is they've got a business model that was developed back in the 70s, and they haven't really moved beyond it at all. So they're hyper-focused on grocery stores. They're not looking at any of the other sources of food that's going around in the community. And what we're doing is we're simply saying, hey, there's a lot of other resources that are flying out the window right now that our community needs. So we're going to figure out a way to get that back into our communities.
Right.
And if we can't get it back in the communities, at least we can turn it into really good soil and get it out to the farms.
There you go.
So
at least get circular somewhere.
Exactly, the circular system. This is what it's all about.
That's right.
For far too long, we've been dealing with extractive economic actions where corporations are hyper-focused on the product or the service that they're delivering, and everything outside of that, all those externalities are getting outsourced to the community. And so now we're starting to realize that those externalities are actually, like we have stakeholders outside of the shareholders that are being affected by all these things. And the more we start realizing that, the more we start honoring the other people that are being affected, the more efficient our business models become. And actually, the more we save money and the more we're able to utilize our resources effectively.
Nice.
I think it's exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. Part of that coordination is communication.
Oh yeah.
Right? Awareness and aligning people. You've written at least one book, 2 books at this point? Three. You're on number 3. What's a good way for people to get a hold of you and check out what you're working on? You just launched your website recently. You want to tell us what that is?
So I founded Fellowship of Living Systems at the beginning of the year. Okay. And this is a constitutionally protected nonprofit organization that's dedicated to aligning these energies through spiritual, physical, and also market energies.
Beautiful.
So livingsys.org is our website. And if you go to
Livingsys, S-Y-S?
S-Y-S. So livingsys.org.
Got it. Perfect. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Exciting. We'll be chatting more for sure as things get updated.
Sounds good. Well, we'll be bringing some updates real soon.
That's right.